حتى بلت الأرض ما حوله, that the earth around him became moist with the tears of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just for a moment of introspection for you and I, when was the last time you and I cried to Allah? One of the scholars was asked, "Ma hiya jannatud dunya?" What's paradise on earth? What's heaven on earth? And he said, when I raise my hands and I can cry in front of Allah after showing Allah and admitting to Allah the weaknesses that I have, and I cry, for me that's heaven on earth. One of the scholars was asked, what do you desire? And he said, "Inni uridu wa ashtahi an abki hatta la aqdira an abki." He said, I wish to be able to cry so profusely in front of Allah until I'm unable to cry any longer. Today you and I, the well in our eyes has dried up. If it's the 27th night of Ramadan and it's Khatmul Quran and we raise our hands, perhaps we'll cry. If it's Qiyamul Layl on the 27th night of Ramadan and we believe and we hope and we anticipate that it might be the night of Qadr, we'll cry. But when was the last time out of Ramadan you and I raised our hands and we cried in front of Allah? Bilal radiallahu anhu comes and he knocks on the door of the Rasul and he says, "Ya Rasulullah, it's the time of Fajr. It's the time of Salatul Subh, Ya Rasulullah." Rasulullah says, "Oh Bilal, the entirety of the night I spent reciting one ayah of Quran. One ayah from the book of Allah. The qawl of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ." That, oh Allah, if you in taghfir lahum, if you exercise your mercy upon them, then oh Allah, they are your slaves. And oh Allah, if you punish them, then oh Allah, they are your slaves, because oh Allah, you are Al-Aziz and Al-Hakim. And then he says, "Oh Bilal, I spent the entirety of the night crying." Allah sends Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam down to the Rasul to ask him, "Why are you crying?" Allah knows why his Habib is crying, but Allah wanted me to know and Allah wanted you to know, so that we can appreciate the life of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't celebrate the life of the Rasul only in 1 month or on one day or on one date. We celebrate the legacy of the Rasul every day throughout the year by bringing alive the teachings of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Jibreel comes to the Rasul and he says, "Ya Rasul, ma yubkika ya Rasulallah." Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying? Ya Rasulullah, what's reducing you to tears? Why are you crying so profusely? And then the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "O Jibreel, man li ummati min ba'di." O Jibreel, who is there that will be crying for my ummah? Who will be there that will be worried about my ummah post my demise? I'm worried. O Jibreel, who will be there to have that care and concern for my ummah post my demise? Jibreel goes back to Allah and Allah sends Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam back telling him that inform the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and tell him, "Inna sanurdika fi ummatik wala nasu'uka abada." That, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will ensure that your ummah are taken care of. O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will ensure that we make you happy with regards to your ummah. He says, "O Bilal, the entirety of my night was spent crying for my ummah." When we read and we go through the lives of these companions, what was the qurb and the closeness and the proximity that they had to the Rasul, where I believe it was Amr ibn al-As or Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhuma, he says that I asked the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, "Ya Rasulullah, who do you love the most?" And amongst thousands of companions, he says the thing that compelled me to ask the question was, I felt I was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So then the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and he indicates towards Abu Bakr radiallahu anha, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Then he asks from amongst the women and the men, he says it's Aisha and her father. These are the two most beloved people to me. And the Sahabi says, I continue to ask until I felt that, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have asked from the very inception, from the beginning. But every companion felt so close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every companion felt so loved by the Rasul of Allah. Today we have 3 kids. And sometimes as our children grow up, they feel that my father has a favorite. Or my father loves them, my sibling more than my father loves me. And the Rasul amongst hundreds of thousands of companions, every Sahabi says, I felt that I was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the few moments that we have, I want to go through the death of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was no more moment in history that was more difficult. There was no calamity that struck that was more heavy than the death of the greatest of creation, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. It was the practice of the Rasul in the 10th year, coming to the end of the life of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In the 10th year, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam done things that were against his custom. So every Ramadan, the Rasul and Jibreel would do muraja'ah of the Quran, they would review the Quran. But in the 10th year of Hijrah, Rasulullah ﷺ and Jibreel done muraja of the Quran twice. Generally, the Rasul ﷺ would do i'tikaf for 10 nights. In the last Ramadan, on the 10th year of the Hijrah, Rasulullah ﷺ done i'tikaf for 20 nights. So there were already subtle indications that the tide is changing and things are developing in a way we don't know what the future holds. Coming into the 11th year of the Hijrah of the Rasul ﷺ is the month of Safar. Scholars have written it's a Wednesday night, the last Wednesday of Safar. And Rasulullah ﷺ, he goes to Abu Muwayhiba radiallahu an, and he tells him, "Oh Abu Muwayhiba, I have been commanded by my Allah, umirtu, I've been commanded to go to the graveyard, and I've been commanded to seek forgiveness for the inhabitants of the graveyard. Would you be kind enough to accompany me and come with me?" Abu Muwayhiba radiallahu an says, "Of course, Ya Rasulullah, it's my honor and my privilege." So that night the Rasul and Abu Muwayhiba radiallahu an go to the graveyard. And the Rasul ﷺ goes to the multiple qubur of his companions. And he prays and he supplicates and he asks and he begs Allah to forgive them, and he makes dua of maghfirah for them. And as they turn around and they prepare to leave the graveyard, Rasulullah ﷺ tells Abu Muwayhiba that, "Oh Abu Muwayhiba, a slave was given a choice. And I was given a choice. Do I want to remain in the realm of this dunya, or do I want to continue to barzakh and akhirah and meet my Allah?" Abu Muwayhiba says, even before I could respond and tell Rasulullah ﷺ, "Ya Rasulullah, we need you. Ya Rasulullah, we depend on you." The Rasul ﷺ says, فَاخْتَرْتُ التَّعْجِيلِ فَاخْتَرْتُ التَّعْجِيلِ. Oh Abu Muwayhiba, I chose to go and meet my Allah. That night, the Wednesday night, the Rasul ﷺ comes home. The Thursday, the Rasul ﷺ frequents the masjid for the salawat and the prayers. After Maghrib on that Thursday, the Rasul ﷺ enters his home, and the Rasul ﷺ starts to pick up a fever. And the fever of the Rasul intensifies to such a degree that the Rasul falls unconscious. The time of Salatul Isha comes. And as the Sahaba are preparing the sufuf and preparing for the arrival of the Rasul for Salatul Isha, Sahaba say that the Rasul never came. So some Sahaba went to see what was happening with the Rasul ﷺ. Is he okay? Rasulullah ﷺ was unconscious. Sahaba waited. After a while, the Rasul ﷺ regained consciousness, and he asked, "Asalla nas, have the people performed their prayer? Have the people prayed their Salatul Isha?" And then he's informed that, "Ya Rasulullah, the Sahaba and the companions, your ummah is waiting for you." And then the Rasul ﷺ once again falls unconscious. You and I can't understand the fever of the Rasul. The reason why we can't understand the fever of the Rasul ﷺ is because when we get a fever, Dr. Saab is here, we go to the pharmacist, we go to the doctor, you take a paracetamol, a Tylenol, and at least for those 2-3 hours you get some relief with the hukam of Allah. But the Rasul ﷺ, Asim and Rasa, he had tied his head. They had placed the wet cloth on the head of the Rasul to try and control the temperature of the Rasul ﷺ. Sahabas say when we touched him, we had never felt anything hotter than the skin of the Rasul ﷺ. That's how high his temperature was. When he came home that day, and he had that fever, and he enters upon one of his spouses, he asks them that, "Can I go and spend these next few nights with Aisha radiallahu anha?" They give him permission, and Rasulullah ﷺ goes to the house of Aisha. And as he enters the house, Aisha radiallahu anha comes to him and says, "Wa ra'sa, wa ra'sa. Oh Muhammad, my head is paining, I have a migraine." And then the Rasul ﷺ says, "Oh Aisha, bal ana wa ra'sa." "Oh Aisha, you're speaking about a migraine and a headache, but how do I even begin to explain to you the pain that I am feeling?" Because the pain of the Rasul was always double what any human or any ummati would experience. And then he puts his head in the lap of Aisha radiallahu anha. And as they're going, they're both in pain. You know, sometimes when husband and wife both are sick, maybe you have a soup together and you just talk and you have perhaps some deeper conversations than you maybe otherwise would. So the Rasul has his head on the lap of Aisha radiallahu anha, and they're having a conversation. And then Aisha radiallahu anha says, "Ya Rasulullah, what would you do if I passed away?" So then the Rasul tells her that, "Oh Aisha, if you pass away before me, you're very lucky. غسلتك ودفنتك ودعوت الله تعالى أن يغفر لك." Oh Aisha, I would take care of your takfeen and your tadfeen. I would take care of your shrouding and your burial. And I would stand on your grave and perform salatul janazah, crying and praying to Allah to forgive you. And then Aisha radiallahu anha says, "Yeah, but after that, Ya Rasulullah, you're going to go back to one of your other wives' houses. Ya Rasulullah, ultimately that night, you're not going to spend with me in the graveyard. That was the humor that they had." One man was on his deathbed, and his wife was also very sick. So he asked his wife that, "If I die, Would you ever marry another man ever again? So she says, an intimate moment with another man, I can't imagine it, I can't even fathom it. I would never get married, I would just be in grief and sorrow for the rest of my days, and I would just go and live with my sister. After a while, when they both got healthy, the wife asked the husband that, you know what, you asked me this question a few days ago, so let me now ask you the same question. If I die, would you remarry? So the husband says, no, I would also be overtaken and overwhelmed with grief and sorrow, and I'll just also go live with your sister. I'll also just go live with you. But the Rasul ﷺ, that was khair. So they come in and the Rasul is in and out of consciousness. Finally the Rasul, he feels he has the strength to go to the door of the masjid, and with the help of some Sahaba carrying him, the Rasul makes an attempt to go to his masjid. But again the Rasul ﷺ falls unconscious. Then the Rasul ﷺ tells Sahaba, Muru Abu Bakr falyusalli bin nas. Inform and command Abu Bakr to lead the congregation in their prayer. Tell Abu Bakr to stand on my place and lead the Sahaba in Salatul Isha on that Thursday. For the next 3 days, the Friday, the Saturday and the Sunday, the Rasul was in and out of consciousness. Sahaba say that, imagine this, there's one person who every day in this masjid performs salah behind the Imam. Or you have those people who are like pillars of the masajid. Every time you come, it's impossible that you don't see them. Then imagine one day for multiple salawat back to back, you fail to see that person, and that person is the most beloved to every single congregant and every single community member. Imagine there's a person who everyone loves the most is him, and now Isha he's not there. Fajr you're hoping maybe he'll be there, he's not there. Dhuhr he's not there. Asr he's absent. Maghrib he's unable to come. How would you feel? It was a very difficult time for Sahaba radiallahu anhum. It was a very difficult moment for Abu Bakr. How can I stand in the place of the Rasul whilst the Rasul is still alive? In these days, a few things happened. One day the Rasul ﷺ plucked up some courage and he sat on the minbar. And he gave a few pertinent advices to the Sahaba, and he asked them, and he wanted to offset any debt that he had. Because the Rasul ﷺ taught you and I that if there's anything that needs to be cleared, clear it. One day at the time of the Battle of Badr, when the Sahaba were lining up and the Rasul sees that some Sahaba are out of line, he pushes one of the companions into line. And the Sahabi says, Awja'tani ya Rasulallah. Awja'tani ya Rasulallah, that was painful. Ya Rasulallah, that hurt. Ya Rasulallah, that never felt too good. So Rasulullah ﷺ immediately takes off his upper garment and he says, take your retribution. Sahaba say it's the night of the Battle of Badr. There's 300 odd Sahaba with 1,000 on the opposing camp, and this Sahabi is worried about the Rasul just maybe pushing him too hard in his chest. That was painful for him. We're going to stand in front of the enemy tomorrow, and a little push in the chest was painful. And then the Sahaba say that you can take the retribution from us. He says, no, the Rasul is the one who pushed me, so I want my haqq. I want my right, I want my retribution. So then the Rasul ﷺ, after he takes off his upper garment and the Sahabi comes close to him, the other Sahaba say, we're just analyzing that. What's he going to do? What's going to happen next? And then this Sahabi, I believe his name was Sawad radiallahu anhu, he comes and he kisses the abdomen of the Rasul ﷺ and he hugs him. He hugs him tight. And he says, Ya Rasulallah, we're going into Badr tomorrow. And I don't know if I'm going to make it out of that battle alive. So I wanted the last body that I touched to be your body, Ya Rasulullah. I wanted the last hug that I had to have been from you, Ya Rasulullah. But the lesson is, whenever there was anything wrong done, the Rasul wanted to offset it immediately. One Sahabi stands up according to some narrations and he says, Ya Rasulullah, there is some debt and the matters are cleared. The Rasul ﷺ goes back to his home. And the next few days are very difficult for every companion. Can you imagine a Masjid al-Nabawi without the green dome? Can you imagine a Masjid al-Nabawi where at some time in that day when you visit, you don't walk past the qabr of the Rasul and say, as-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Medina won't be the same without the presence of the Rasul deceased. So how could Medina have been the same without the presence of the Rasul in his masjid whilst he was alive? The Rasul ﷺ, for you and I to understand how difficult those days were, he says that إِذَا أُصِيبَ أَحَدُكُمْ بِمُصِيبَةٍ فَلْيَذْكُرْ مُصِيبَتَهُ بِي. That whenever any of you experiences any calamity, remember there was no calamity greater than the fact that you were born into a world absent of the presence of the Rasul ﷺ. If you ever go through any problem, financial, marital, in your community, your society, your occupation, your job, whatever it may be, then remember the fact that you were born in a world where I wasn't there. There is no greater calamity. Days passed. Sunday night, Salatul Isha, or Monday morning, Salatul Fajr. The Rasul ﷺ regains some consciousness and he goes to the door of his hujrah, the window, that area of his hujrah. He removes the veil that was the partition between his hujrah and the masjid. And as he removes the veil and he sees his Sahaba radiallahu anhum are performing their salah, and they're performing their obligation to Allah, whether it was Isha or Fajr. When the Rasul ﷺ was looking at them, some Sahaba say that we could tell that the Rasul was standing, so some of us actually even peeked and took a look at him. And when we saw the face of the Rasul's face was illuminated. The Rasul's face was radiant. The Rasul's face was so beautiful and he had a smile on his face. And then the Rasul ﷺ closes the veil and he goes and lays down. Scholars of history have written that why did the Rasul smile? One of the reasons for the smile of the Rasul was when he saw that his Sahaba were fulfilling the obligation that they had to Allah, it was a sense of satisfaction. In Hajjatul Wada', in front of over 120,000 Sahaba, when the Rasul ﷺ gave his farewell sermon, and he asked the question, Ala hal ballagt? Have I completed the mission that my Allah sent me with? Have I relayed the message that my Allah commanded me to relay? And the entirety of the camp of Sahaba in one voice in union, what did they say? بلغت الرسالة أديت الأمانة ونصحت الأمة. That, oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you gave us the message. You fulfilled the amana and the trust that was on your shoulders. The smile of the Rasul was because he was happy with where the Sahaba were in terms of their spirituality. It's like I believe it was a year ago, last year around July time, one of our close friends, 26 years old, from Houston, Texas. He passed away in Canada. He went to Canada because it was his sister's walima, wedding, whatever it may have been. After Dhuhr that day was the walima and the ceremony. That evening, I believe after Maghrib or Isha, some brothers were stood outside the masjid and there was someone who had a motorbike. And my friend, he loved riding motorbikes. His name was Sheikh Qari what was his name, man? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. What was his name? How can I forget? Mushfiq. Quwaybili was his surname. Mushfiq. Qari Mushfiq, rahimahullah. When I was in South Africa and I was in my iftar course, the 1 year or 2 years beyond the 6 years, which are the Alimiya program, I never stayed in the madrasa. I stayed in an apartment. And the roommate that I had was in the final year of his Alimiya, and Sheikh Mushfiq and him were roommates, or were classmates. So every day without fail, Sheikh Mushfiq would come to our apartment. And there was a time when he was on a gym hype and him and my roommate would go to the gym. And he was an amazing qari, a beautiful recitation Allah blessed him with. If you hear his tilawah, it takes you feel as though the Quran is being revealed. So he jumps on a motorbike. His sister just got married in the afternoon. And he goes just around the corner and he passes away. He meets up in an accident. What happened? There was no cameras. No one knows what happened exactly, the specifics. But he passed away that day. And we flew to Canada and we were there at the time of Salatul Janazah. And after the Janazah was performed, we saw his father looking at his face. And his father, by the qasam of Allah, had a smile on his face. Of course, there were moments of tears and sadness. But at that moment, I remember vividly, we stood out the masjid, everyone was emotionally moved. He was, I believe, 25, 26 years old, very young, 27. His father looked at him, and his father had a smile on his face. That smile means I was content and happy with my son. That smile is the smile that the Rasul had when the Rasul removed the veil and he had a peep at the Sahaba. My question is, if the Rasul saw you and I today, would he smile or would he cry? If the Rasul just had a window to look at the state and the affairs of the ummah today, with that removal of that veil to give him a window into the ummah, would he smile or would he cry? Are our affairs in order? What's the level of our spirituality? What's the level of our ta'alluq with the deen of Allah? The Rasul ﷺ, he closes the veil and he goes and lays down. Aisha radiallahu anha says that there was a sweet fragrance that totally filled the room at that moment. And the Rasul ﷺ was laying and my brother Abdul Rahman entered the room and he had a miswak in his hand. And the Rasul started to look at the miswak. So I asked him, Ya Rasulullah, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do you want to perhaps use the siwak? And he indicated with his head that yes, he wants the siwak. She says, I took the siwak, I made it moist with my saliva, and I started to use the siwak on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She says the Rasul was in and out of consciousness. And he was saying that inna lil mawti sakarat. Death has its pangs and it's a very painful experience. Death, for many of us, we may feel it's an easy experience. If you are a righteous person whose faith was upright, then yes, death will be perhaps easy. But otherwise, death, the extraction of the ruh and the soul, it's a very difficult thing. And then she says that the Rasul ﷺ constantly was saying, Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la. Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam enters and he asked the Rasul ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah, Malakul Maut is at the door, because the practice was, before the angel of death came to take and remove the soul of a Nabi, permission was sought. So then the Rasul ﷺ, when Jibreel came to him and he said that, Ya Rasulullah, the angel of death is at the door, should I allow him in? Or do you want to send him off? And then the Rasul ﷺ said, Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la. Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la. Jibreel tells the Rasul that even Allah ishtaqa ila liqa'ik, that even Allah is desirous of meeting you. My dear respected Muslims, the hadith of the Rasul is very clear. Man ahabba liqa Allahi ahabba Allahu liqa'ahu. Whoever is desirous to meet Allah, Allah is desirous to meet you. وَمَنْ كَرِهَ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَهُ. But whoever fears death to a degree where they don't want to meet Allah, then Allah also doesn't want to meet you. Allah also doesn't want to, Allah doesn't have the desire to see you and meet you. And today for us, death is the scariest reality. It's a reality. And it is something to be fearful of. But that fear isn't supposed to create some stagnation within us. That fear is supposed to motivate us to want to be better tomorrow than we were today and yesterday. But why is it that you and I can't cry like we began with? Ali radiallahu anhu said, the drying of the eye is min qaswatil qalb. The reason why you can't cry is because the heart has become hard. وَقَسْوَةُ الْقَلْبِ مِنْ كَثْرَةِ الذُّنُوبِ. And the heart is hard because of excessive sin. وَكَثْرَةُ الذُّنُوبِ مِنْ نِسْيَانِ مِنْ طُولِ الْأَمَلِ. Because of the lengthy and great aspirations that we have, we forget death. وَطُولُ الْأَمَلِ مِنْ نِسْيَانِ الْمَوْتِ. We forget that we have to die. We're preparing to ensure that our children are financially stable post our demise. But we haven't prepared for our own death. What world are we living in? In what world does that make sense? I am preparing for something that I don't even know I will reach, and I am failing to prepare for something that's yaqeen. وَاعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ. Where's the logic? We haven't prepared enough. And then the Rasul ﷺ does the siwak. Fatima radiallahu anha walks in. And as Fatima radiallahu anha walks in, she was the daughter of the Rasul. She was the most beloved to the Rasul ﷺ. She walks in, and the Rasul can see that his daughter is visibly upset. And the Rasul ﷺ called her, and on one occasion when he called her and he says something to her, she cries. And then he called her again and he says something to her and she smiles. Aisha radiallahu anha says that I asked Fatima bint Muhammad, Fatima bint Rasulullah, that, oh Fatima, what did the Rasul say to you due to which you cried, and then later on due to which you smiled? She says that, I won't tell you. I'm not going to, that's between me and my father. That's a secret between daughter and father. And then Aisha radiallahu anha says, once that fragrance enveloped the room, and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la, Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la, Allahumma bir rafiq al-a'la. She says, all of a sudden the body of the Rasul became heavy. The hands and the arms of the Rasul dropped. And she said, that was an indication to me that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam had breathed his last. Aisha radiallahu anha says that I began to scream and I began to yell, Mata Rasulullah. The reality was many Sahaba who would have loved to have been there weren't even there. Because that morning when the Rasul moved the veil, and his face was so radiant, some Sahaba felt that the Rasul is perhaps in recovery. The health of the Rasul is improving. So even Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, it's so unique and amazing. The companion who was side by side with the Rasul for the duration of his life in every moment, wasn't there at the time of the demise of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And perhaps it was because he wouldn't have been able to bear that catastrophe. So he comes and he says, Ya Rasulullah, it seems as though your health is improving. Would you perhaps give me permission to go and visit one of my spouses on the outskirts of the city? The Rasul said, of course, O Abu Bakr. So then Aisha radiallahu anha starts to scream and yell, Mata Rasulullah, Mata Rasulullah, Mata Rasulullah, that the Rasul of Allah has passed on. Can you for a moment perhaps even try to imagine? Close your eyes and take yourselves to Medina, the masjid of the Rasul and the hujra of Aisha radiallahu anha. His head is in her lap. She does the siwak. He says his final words. He makes his daughter cry and laugh. And then his body becomes heavy. His arms drop. And now everyone is screaming and yelling, Mata Rasulullah, Mata Rasulullah, Mata Rasulullah. That the Rasul has moved on from this world. The eloquent Ali became mute. The modest Uthman became numb. The ferocious Umar lost control. He walks and he screams and he runs and he says, if anyone tells me that Muhammad has passed on, I'll sever his head from his neck. I'll take his head off. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is informed of the death of the Rasul and he comes running back. He comes over the face of the Rasul and then as he's looking, he kisses the forehead of the Rasul and he says, Tibta hayyan wa mayyita. Ya Rasulullah, you were so fragrant, beautiful and elegant alive, and you are equally fragrant, beautiful and elegant deceased. He covers the face of the Rasul ﷺ. He goes to the masjid. He ascends the mimbar. There's panic amongst Sahaba. There's panic amongst, we can't understand it because unfortunately we don't love him the way he ought to be loved. We don't love him the way, so we can't understand, we weren't with him. But for Sahaba, the entire world came crushing to the ground. Imagine every person lost their most beloved one. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu understands the sensitivity of the moment. It's a very delicate moment in Islamic history. Some people started to say, we won't give the zakat. Others started to leave Islam. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ascends the pulpit and the mimbar. And he quotes the verse, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. And here, when Allah said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ, Muhammad wasn't but a messenger. The negation isn't to negate the maqam and the rank of the Rasul. The negation is to negate divinity from the Rasul ﷺ. So when Allah said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ, Muhammad wasn't but a messenger. It wasn't to downplay the maqam, but it was to make it crystal clear to the ummah that the Rasul was a human. The Rasul was not divine. The Rasul had to die. Umar radiallahu anhu says that فَكَأَنِّي لَمْ أَسْمَعْ هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Wallahi, I felt as though that was the first time I heard the ayah. And then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu gives his speech and his sermon that we spoke about when we covered his biography. It was a very, very difficult moment. Aisha radiallahu anha later on goes to Fatima radiallahu anha and she says, tell me, what did your dad say to you and your father say to you that you cried and then you laughed? And then she says that when my father called me close and he told me that, oh, my beloved daughter, your father is on his way out of this dunya and your father is departing from the realm of this world. She says that was so difficult for me to bear that it reduced me to tears. Then he called me and he told me, oh Fatima, from my family you will be the first to join me and you will be the queen of the women of Jannah. And she says that made me laugh and that made me smile. Sahaba who were in Medina, when they came back, they say, أظلمت المدينة. When the Rasul was there, Medina was radiant. But when Mu'adh ibn Jabal comes back from Yemen and he sees Medina, he says, by the qasam of Allah, Medina became a bit dark. It wasn't the same. Some Sahaba couldn't even continue to live there. They had to leave, they had to migrate. It was a very, very difficult moment. But as difficult as that moment was, Sahaba recouped. Sahaba got together again and the Ummah stood up from that difficulty. And if that was the greatest calamity and the Ummah rose once again, then whatever you and I are seeing across the globe should give us hope. That the Ummah will definitely rise once again. The Ummah will definitely stand once again. The Ummah will definitely gain its strength once again, because those initial moments post the demise of the Rasul, wallahi, they were so difficult. They were so difficult. And that's why Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the perfect person to take the reign of the Ummah and to take the Ummah forward in that regard. This month of Rabi'ul Awwal is a month where many speak about the birth of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this month of Rabi'ul Awwal also is the month wherein the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam departed from this world. It's a moment of introspection that how much do you and I truly love him? How much do we emulate him? How much do we imitate him? How much do we follow him? People say, and I've quoted this many times, that the car you drive is Japanese and German. The cuisine is Italian or Asian. فَأَيْنَ مُحَمَّدِيَّةٌ? Where is a sign on you that shows that you are a Muhammadi? That when you walk, people know you are a Muhammadi. You are an ummati of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam who spent his entire night crying for you and I. Even our own parents haven't done that. Even those closest to us haven't done that. The Rasul, ummati, 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 ummati. We make dua to Allah that He allow us to understand the maqam of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He allow us to follow the sunnah with pride and with honor, with privilege, with love, with care. That Allah allow us to follow His footsteps. Man ahya sunnati inda fasadi ummati falahu ajru mi'ati shaheed. Whoever brings alive one sunnah at a time of fitna, fasad and corruption, that person will receive the reward of 100 martyrs. One martyr before the first drop of blood hits the ground, the entirety of their sins are forgiven. Bringing alive the sunnah. We make dua to Allah that He allow us to come close to Him. He allow us to read about Him. Just an announcement, by the way, I'm sure you've seen in the groups, on the 27th of September, inshallah, we will be having a seerah conference where we will be speaking about different elements of the life of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we can learn and we can be rejuvenated. And we have great scholars coming. We have a scholar, Sheikh Umar from Massachusetts, who will be coming and joining us. And we have Sheikh Asim from Buffalo, a very senior scholar who has been teaching the senior books of hadith for over 2 decades. He will also be joining us. So please make a concentrated effort to participate, to be there. I know it's a lengthier program than what we may be used to. Instead of Maghrib to Isha, it's Asr to Isha. What's 3 hours? What's 3 hours? When it comes to the NFL Super Bowl, I promise you we're glued to that screen more than 3 hours. We're even watching the halftime break and the advert with full attention. But 3 hours, 5, and in there you got Asr, Maghrib and Isha, 3 salats you'll be able to perform in the masjid. So even those who are perhaps possibly listening online, make a concentrated effort, spread the word and bring someone. One person comes and gets inspired to bring alive the sunnah in their life, or make a change and transformation. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam told you that will be better for you than humur na'am, a red camel. So inshallah we make intention inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.